I am being poisoned. It started with a headache. At first I thought it was just stress. I'd been working long hours, juggling deadlines, and barely getting enough sleep. But this headache was different. It was sharp, relentless, like a knife digging into my skull. No amount of aspirin or water seemed to help. Then came the nausea. It hit me out of nowhere, a wave of dizziness that left me clutching the edge of my desk. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up. After that, the nausea became a constant companion, lurking in the background, waiting to strike. I went to the doctor, convinced I had the flu or maybe a bad case of food poisoning, but the tests came back clean. But I wasn't fine. The symptoms only got worse. The headaches became migraines so severe that I had to lie in a dark room for hours praying for relief. The nausea turned into vomiting, sometimes multiple times. A day I started losing weight, my clothes hanging off my frame. My skin became pale and clammy and dark circles formed under my eyes. I looked like a ghost of myself. I went back to the doctor demanding more tests, blood work, MRIs, x-rays. They all came back normal. The doctors were baffled. "There's nothing physically wrong with you," they said. "Maybe it's stress or anxiety. Have you considered seeing a therapist?" I wanted to scream. I wasn't imagining this. Something was wrong with me. I could feel it. Then one night I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing. I stumbled to the bathroom, my vision blurry, and splashed water on my face. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. My eyes were sunken, my cheeks hollow. I looked like I was dying. And then it hit me. What if I was? I started researching my symptoms, scouring the internet for answers. That's when I stumbled across an article about poisoning. The symptoms matched mine, almost exactly. Headaches, nausea, weight loss, fatigue. But how could I be poisoned? I lived alone. I cooked my own meals. I didn't take any medications. It didn't make sense. Then I remembered the water. A few weeks ago, I'd noticed a strange taste in my tap water. It was faint, almost metallic, but definitely there. I'd mentioned it to my landlord, but had brushed it off, saying it was probably just old pipes. I'd started buying bottled water after that, but I still used the tap water for cooking and brushing my teeth. Could that be it? Could someone have poisoned my water? The thought sent a chill down my spine. It sounded crazy, paranoid, but what if it wasn't? I decided to test it. I filled a glass with tap water and took it to a lab that specialized in water testing. The results came back a few days later, and my worst fears were confirmed. The water was contaminated with arsenic. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Arsenic, a deadly poison. Someone had been putting it in my water. I went straight to the police, but they were skeptical. "Are you sure it's not just a problem with the pipes?" the detective asked. "Old buildings can have all kinds of issues." "It's not the pipes," I said, my voice trembling. "Someone did this. Someone's trying to kill me." The detective promised to look into it, but I could tell he didn't believe me. He thought I was paranoid, maybe even delusional. But I knew the truth. Someone was poisoning me, and I had to find out who. I started by changing my routine. I stopped using the tap water entirely, switching to bottled water for everything. I started cooking all my meals from scratch, using only ingredients I'd bought myself. I even started carrying a water bottle with me everywhere I went, just in case. The symptoms started to improve. The headaches became less frequent. The nausea subsided. I started to feel like myself again. But I knew I wasn't safe. Whoever had done this was still out there, and they weren't going to stop. Then one night I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My heart raced as I pushed it open, my hand trembling on the pepper spray I now carried everywhere. The living room was dark, but I could see that something was off. The furniture had been moved just slightly, like someone had been searching through my things. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of an intruder. They dusted for fingerprints, but they didn't find anything. "Are you sure you didn't just leave the door open?" the officer asked. I shook my head, my hands trembling. "I know what I saw. Someone was here." The officer gave me a sympathetic look, but I could tell he didn't believe me. "Well, keep an eye on the area," he said, "but you might want to consider getting a security system." I didn't need a security system. I needed answers. I started digging into my past, trying to figure out who would want to hurt me. I didn't have any enemies that I knew of, but maybe there was someone I'd forgotten about, someone who held a grudge. Then I remembered my ex-boyfriend Mark. We'd broken up a year ago, and it hadn't been pretty. He'd been controlling, possessive, and when I'd finally ended things, he hadn't taken it well. Had called me constantly, showed up at my apartment, unannounced, even threatened me a few times. I'd gotten a restraining order, but he'd disappeared. After that, I hadn't heard from him in months. Could it be him? Could he be the one poisoning me? I called the police and told them about Mark, but they said there wasn't enough evidence to link him to the poisoning. Well, look into it, the detective said. But without proof, there's not much we can do. I felt like I was going crazy. I knew Mark was behind this, but I couldn't prove it. And if the police wouldn't help me, I had to take matters into my own hands. I started carrying a knife with me just in case. I installed security cameras around my apartment, hoping to catch Mark in the act. I even started sleeping with a baseball bat next to my bed. But no matter what I did, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every time I left the house, I felt like someone was following me. I'd see the same car parked down the street, the same figure standing in the shadows. But every time I called the police, they'd find nothing. I called the police, they'd find. Then one night, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom window sliding open. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The room was dark, but I could see the silhouette of someone climbing through the window. They moved slowly, deliberately, like they were savoring the moment. I reached for the baseball bat, my hands trembling, and swung it as hard as I could. There was a sickening crunch as it connected with the intruder's head, and they crumpled to the floor. I turned on the light, my heart racing, and saw Mark lying there, blood streaming from his forehead. His eyes were wide with shock, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Then he smiled. "You're stronger than I thought," he said, his voice slurred. "But it's too late, you're already dead." I felt a wave of nausea as his words sank in. "What are you talking at?" He laughed, a cold, hollow sound. "The arsenic, it's already in your system. Even if you stop drinking the water, it's too late. You're going to die, Emily, and there's nothing you can do about it." I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. He was right. Even if I stopped drinking the water, the arsenic was already in my body. It was only a matter of time. But I wasn't going to let him win. I called the police, and they arrived within minutes. They arrested Mark and took him away, but I knew it wasn't over. I was still poisoned, and I didn't know how much time I had left. I spent the next few days in the hospital undergoing treatment to remove the arsenic from my system. It was painful, exhausting, but I knew I had to fight. I wasn't going to let Mark take my life. The doctors told me I was lucky. If I'd waited any longer, the damage would have been irreversible. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt angry that Mark had done this to me, angry that I'd let him get so close. But most of all, I felt determined. I wasn't going to let him win. I was going to survive, and I was going to make sure he paid for what he'd done. It's been a few months now, and I'm still recovering. The physical scars are fading, but the emotional ones are harder to heal. I still have nightmares about Mark, about the poison, about the feeling of being trapped. But I'm not going to let him control me anymore. I'm stronger than he ever thought I was, and I'm not going to let anyone take my life away from me again.